This is Pastor Gene Bailey. He hosts a TV show called Flashpoint. It airs on the Victory Network, owned and operated by Kenneth Copeland. It's about as far right as it gets. This is part 5. If you haven't seen the other parts, don't sweat it. This stands independently of the rest. You don't have to see the others to understand what's happening here. If there's missing context, I'll provide it. In the last one, Pastor Dutch Sheets had a complete emotional meltdown where he found himself rolling on the floor crying, draped in an American flag, because the U.S. government isn't controlled by Christian nationalists. I'm not being hyperbolic. In this one, Pastor Gene Bailey is about to give his audience a rousing speech that starts with, "We are at war. I'm not saying you should pick up your AR and take care of business. However, no joke, this is one of the most unhinged speeches I've seen in a while." Let's watch.
So it's my turn for a few minutes.
Okay, this is Gene Bailey. He's the host of this show, and I understand he's a pastor.
Recently, I have understood more of the times that we're living in than ever before. And ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know it, you're in the middle of a war.
This kind of language is deeply, deeply disturbing to me. Saying that these people are in a war, it's an attempt to prepare them to be willing to do absolutely anything, literally anything, for the cause.
And what we're dealing with on a daily basis are acts of war. Now, I know Newsweek and the other media is going to twist what I have to say, but let me say right here, I'm not talking about going and getting your AR and go down and take care of business.
They have been. This is not the first time they've talked about going to war, and they have actually said they need to be prepared to take out their family members if it comes to that and stuff. Seriously, this is not the first time they've actually alluded to that. In fact, it sounds like he's directly denouncing that right now, but he's gotten his crowd whipped into a blood frenzy over it enough over the years that using that kind of language is all it takes to get somebody to do something psychotic. Let me show you what I mean. This is a famous clip from a Charlie Kirk conference. Now, I know that this isn't a Charlie Kirk conference that we're watching. This is Flashpoint, but it's the exact same audience. And the things that Gene Bailey and these other people say are the exact things that Charlie Kirk says. Listen to where the audience is when they open questions to them.
At this point, we're living under a corporate and medical fascism. This is tyranny. When do we get to use the guns?
I know you're thinking to yourself, well, he's just being a jokester over here, right? He's just being hyperbolic.
No, and I'm not, that's not a joke. I'm not saying it like that. I mean, literally, where's the line? How many elections are they going to steal before we kill these people?
So that's the Flashpoint audience. That's the Charlie Kirk audience. That's a right-wing audience. That's what they believe. So I don't feel it's, out of the ordinary or a ridiculous question to ask what you mean when you say we're at war, Gene Bailey. I don't feel like it's an unfair question to ask.
War. Now, I know Newsweek and the other media is going to twist what I have to say, but let me say right here, I'm not talking about going and getting your AR and go down and take care of business.
I don't have to twist it. The audience is interpreting it the way that they're interpreting it, and he knows that's how it's being interpreted. This is literally, out of the hundreds of times I've heard them talk about how this is war, the hundreds of times I've heard them talk about taking care of a tyrannical government and how liberals are demons and everything else. This is the first time I've heard him say, I'm not talking about that specifically. The audience knows what he's talking about.
It's not what I'm talking about. However, we are in a war nonetheless.
So he didn't go off on a completely different subject. He said, I'm not saying that you should do this, but we are in a war. That's what he just said, effectively. I'm not saying you should do this, but we are in a war.
Let's do a little rewind here for just a moment. Let's go back to 2020. What happened in 2020? We had a nation that was thriving. We had an economy that was booming. We were selling energy instead of receiving energy.
Dude, 2020? Are we talking about the same 2020? Is this when COVID hit? We didn't have an economy that was booming. What kind of a fantasy land do you live in? Our economy, people were staying home out of fear of spreading the virus. Our economy was not booming in any way. Gas prices were low because nobody was driving anywhere because they were staying home because they were too afraid to spread COVID. What's this dude even talking about? This makes no sense.
Instead of buying it. That's an act of war. What happened on November 8th? That stolen election, and yes, it was stolen.
This is disturbing, dude. This is so deeply disturbing what he's saying right now. Whether he prefaces this whole thing with, you don't need, I'm not talking about going down with your AR and dealing with business. Whether he prefaces the whole bit, the sermon or whatever it is, with that or not, doesn't really matter when what he's saying is we are at war and something needs to be done about it. And we can see the direct results of what this kind of language inspires, which is what we saw with Charlie Kirk's audience a minute ago.
You know, what's interesting is how nowadays it's almost, Mike, not cool to say to fix 2020. People like, oh, well, we just need to move on. That was an act of war. It was an act of war that came from we thought we were fighting against the Democrats. And we thought we were fighting against the Republicans, some of the rhinos in office. But ladies and gentlemen, while we may have issues with both of those parties, there's a much higher issue at hand. And it is the spiritual state of our nation. And what's above that, above the rhinos and the Democrats, is not even George Soros. And he's a problem. There's an act of war. What we're dealing with is much higher. We're looking at...
These people actually believe that George Soros is like the ultimate boogeyman for everything and everybody. And they will make shit up about the guy. He's just a Jewish investor. A Jewish investor who was actually in danger of his life back during World War II. He had to flee the area, and it was a huge thing. So anyway, George Soros is their ultimate boogeyman, and they've gone as far as to fabricate stuff they claim that he was doing. There's a fake contract that leaked to 4chan years and years ago, a fake contract between Black Lives Matter and Antifa protesters and George Soros, where supposedly George Soros was paying Antifa protesters $15,000 per protest to go riot and loot and make a mess of things. Obviously fake completely, but these people bought it. They believed it. They ate it up because they believe that they are at war with George Soros and others. With the left, they will believe anything that reaffirms their already existing beliefs. That's how all this works. And that is why it doesn't matter if he says it's not time to pick up the AR yet at the beginning of his speech. These people believe that it is anyways, whether he says it is or not. And when he repeats conspiracy theories about George Soros and others, it makes it worse every time. This is called stochastic terrorism, when he's getting his audience whipped into a blood frenzy and ready to go do something fucking psychotic. That's what this is. It's stochastic terrorism. And in my opinion, it should be illegal. It should be criminally charged, just like Charles Manson was criminally charged for whipping people into a blood frenzy and getting them to do something psychotic, like murder somebody. But unfortunately, stochastic terrorism is not a crime in the United States. Maybe one day, probably not, but who knows? Anyway, let's keep listening to him use the weapon of stochastic terrorism against people like George Soros.
At as sure as I'm standing here, an act of war against you, your family, your children, your grandchildren. They want to take your children. They want to elevate government over God. And the truth is...
Notice his use of the word they. It's called weasel words. He's referring to some ambiguous authority, not specifying who it is, just referring to some group of people out there who wants to hurt you, who's out to get you, and you have to do something about it or they'll succeed in getting you. Just another method of getting people whipped into a blood frenzy to do something insane.
They will do it.
There it is again. They.
If you don't stand up. Yep. They will take it. As Eric has talked about, history proves this. Hitler sat back and watched the Armenian massacre with glee because the world didn't do anything about it.
Didn't the Armenian genocide happen in the early 1900s? I thought it was the early 1900s. Yeah, okay. The Armenian genocide happened in 1915. I thought it was 1910 for some reason. What's he talking about? Hitler sat back and watched this happen. That didn't happen in World War II, did it? Was there another attack on the Armenians? Yeah, so the Armenian genocide was the annihilation of Armenian Christian people living in the Ottoman Empire from 1915 to 1916. World War II started in 1914, and Hitler was in World War I. Did I say World War II? I'm sorry. World War I started in 1914, and Hitler was in World War I. He was wearing a gas mask back then, but it didn't fit properly because his mustache was coming out the sides, and that's why Hitler actually shaved his mustache into the shape that we all know and love now, the Hitler stash, was so that the gas mask would fit properly, and he just kind of kept the look. Anyway, Hitler was not in any kind of position of power in 1915 when the Armenian genocide was going on, was he? I don't believe he was. What is he talking about? The Armenians... What? Does this guy know history? Even if he doesn't know history, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. These people listen to what he says and soak it up. They believe it. Even when he's completely and totally 100% wrong about things. He says it and they buy it.
History proves this. Hitler sat back and watched the Armenian massacre with glee because the world didn't do anything about it.
Unless there's another Armenian massacre that I don't know about other than the Armenian genocide, I have no idea what he's talking about.
Therefore, he knew he could do what he wanted to with the Jews.
Oh, okay. So he's saying Hitler sat back and watched it happen and realized that he could use it to attack people or whatever else. Got it.
You see, if we do not stand up and realize that we're in a war, if we don't stand up and put our own reputation on the line because we believe in a higher power, we in essence give up.
Okay, I simply disagree with that, and it's actually unbiblical. The Bible specifically instructs you to stay out of politics and just teach people about Jesus. That simple. Romans 13. If you disagree with that, you're just wrong. You just don't want to read the Bible verses that are in there. You just don't want to accept what the Bible has to say, plain and simple.
We're not even waving a white flag. We're just laying down. So we had a stolen election.
No, we didn't.
Then we had January 6th.
Yep, that was Trump's fault.
And we all thought things would be taken care of by January 20th. Neither.
Yeah, because they live in a fantasy land.
Happened. And then we have good people who just walked in a building innocently, sitting in jail, sitting in prison.
Walked in a building innocently? He's talking about the January 6th people. No. The people who were at the Capitol on January 6th but didn't enter the building were not charged with serious offenses. The people who stayed outside the building, I don't think they were charged at all. If you went inside the building, you broke the law. It is illegal to go inside that building without permission. Not to mention the fact that there were congressmen hiding And Secret Service agents, like, hiding Mike Pence. You know why? The people outside the building were screaming, "Hang Mike Pence," and they had gallows out front. This wasn't just some people on a tourist trip, okay? This was people looking for blood. And they would have found it if it weren't for the fact that there are tunnels underneath the Capitol building, and Secret Service members and other Capitol Police and other people like that who knew what they were doing and were ready to literally sacrifice their own lives to save people. It's disgusting that they're trying to rehabilitate the image of full-blown terrorists. Full-blown terrorists.
And somehow this is just okay. It is okay unless you and I stand up and understand we are not in a battle, we are in a war.
Trying to get him whipped into a blood frenzy. And he knew how it would look when he said all of this, so he prefaced it with, "I'm not telling anybody to pick up their guns right now." Because if he hadn't said that, it would absolutely be taken as, pick up your guns and do something. And it should be taken that way anyways. He said, "I'm not telling you to pick up your guns, but," and then he followed that up with a bunch of psychotic stuff about how evil Democrats are and how they're in a war and they're losing the war and you need to do something about it. You need to stand up and do something about it. What are you asking them to stand up and do if not pick up a gun and do something? Like, I'm at a loss here. What is he even requesting of them? You think these people aren't going to vote? Of course they're going to vote. You don't need to encourage them anymore to vote. What else could he be asking them to do?
For you, it's against you and it's against me and it's against our children. And Pastor, let me tell you, you can think you're going to sit by and not talk about politics. And that will happen right up to the day they take your church from you.
Well, that is what the Bible says. Don't get involved in politics. Follow the laws of the land until they conflict with the laws of the Bible. Just live your life and do your thing and teach about Jesus, and that's it. Until you start being persecuted for your faith, and then you have to start hiding it. It doesn't say take over the government. It doesn't say force your beliefs on other people. It says stay out of politics. Romans 13. But none of it matters because they want to take over politics, and they're going to do everything they can to do it.
You see, the acts of war are around us every day. Suddenly we were dealt with a China virus. Okay, yeah, I'm going there.
As if anybody in the audience expected him not to, and as if anybody else cares.
It's funny how it's my body, my choice, unless you don't want to take a vaccine. I'm just saying.
Well, which is it? Is it my body, my choice or not? If you really believe that it's my body, my choice, then you should have no issue with people getting abortions. The hypocrisy is what really gets me, first of all. And second, this isn't just your body when it comes to a vaccine. When it comes to abortion, we're talking a clump of cells, 150 cells. When the brain of a fly is 200,000 cells. That is not, that doesn't really affect anybody except for you, your body, in the case of abortion. But when you refuse to get vaccinated, you're putting everybody at risk that's around you. That is very different. But that nuance goes right over their heads. They don't give a shit. What they give a shit about is spreading propaganda. You look, people have these shit-eating grins on their faces like they just won, like they just got one over on the libs or something. It's ridiculous.
So here we are, we're dealing with a virus that shuts down America. It just didn't shut down businesses. It shut down the church. And I am not against pastors, okay? I am one. So let me tell you what happened. It used to
Get ready for the persecution porn.
be common to play to the middle. It used to be fairly easy to be a pastor in America. You kind of have your little club over here to the side, you do what you do, and everybody stays in the church, and maybe you give to foreign missions, and then you have a good life. Now, I'm minimizing it, I know. But suddenly we were dealt with the very reality that even our existence to worship what our founding fathers fought for, died for when they signed their name to that Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, now we are being persecuted for.
Christians, white Christian evangelical pastors, are being persecuted? In no stretch of the imagination are white Christian evangelicals being persecuted, like not even a little bit. But persecution builds a sense of camaraderie, group loyalty, and brotherhood, and that's why every cult in human history has used it as a weapon against people that they don't like.
And we were letting them do it.
There's some annoying person in the front row who yells responses every time.
So what happened? We woke up. Well, some of us did. And said, no, we're going to have church anyway.
See, this is what's really interesting to me. There was no federal lockdown, okay? The federal government did not shut down at any point. State governments said you can't have over 10 people meet at the same time, right? The Bible says where 2 or more meet, God is with them. So these churches could have chosen to meet with 10 people at a time, or 8 people, or hell, even 2, and God would have been with them. Instead of respecting the laws of the land, which is specifically instructed by the Bible in Romans 13, instead of respecting the laws of the land and respecting the rules of the Bible, they decided to explicitly and specifically break the laws of the land against the advice in Romans 13, which is unbiblical, by the way. They decided to completely ignore what the Bible said and fight the local governments and do their best to take over the local governments. What they did is explicitly unbiblical, and they are crying about being persecuted in the process. This is a death cult that desperately wants to take control of the U.S. government and appear to be tentatively succeeding to some degree.
Don't you think for a moment that their attempt to shut down the church wasn't forced to get you to be quiet?
They didn't try to shut down churches. They asked churches to hold services outside, or wear masks and social distance, or split into groups of 10 people, or hold services on Zoom. They didn't try to shut down churches at any point, ever. The churches that were shut down, quote unquote, did it of their own free will. They chose none of those options. They chose to be contrary and difficult intentionally to cause a problem with people.
All of this was to strike fear in you. And as long as you give in to the fear, you give in to the enemy. So here we are. So now we've got COVID. Now we've got a horrible economy. Things are going. In day one of a false administration, what does he do? He shuts.
We don't have a horrible economy. Our economy is actually pretty strong right now, but they need the economy to be horrible for their persecution line to ring true even a little bit. So they're going to say it anyways, even though it's not really true.
This was to strike fear in you.
Okay, let me rephrase. We do have a horrible economy in terms of what the economy was 50 years ago. The economy could be... The economy, all things considered, is actually really, really good right now compared to what it was over the past 5 years or so. Job numbers are good. A lot of stuff is really, really good right now. A lot of stuff is bad. A lot of stuff is good. It is not fair to call it a bad economy. But like I said, they need it to be viewed as a bad economy, or their whole narrative doesn't work. Their whole persecution bit doesn't work.
You think for a moment that their attempt to shut down the church wasn't forced to get you to be quiet. All of this was to strike fear in you. And as long as you give in to the fear, you give in to the enemy. So here we are. So now we got COVID. Now we've got a horrible economy. Things are going. In day one of a false administration, what does he do? He shuts off the pipeline. He shuts off energy.
Biden shut off energy? What? No. No to all of that. That makes no sense whatsoever. The Keystone Pipeline is still in operation. He just didn't move to phase 4, which had been planned. Or maybe phase 3. I don't remember which one he stalled on. Does not mean that he stopped energy from flowing. You can't use your lights anymore or any of that. And like it's Biden's fault. It's just ridiculous from top to bottom. They need the country to be a train wreck for their ridiculous narrative to work.
Then we have the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I tell you, it made me so mad.
To be perfectly honest, the Afghanistan withdrawal was not that bad. It could have been better. Could have been a lot worse. And besides that, it was Trump's plan in the first place. The thing that surprised people was how quickly the Taliban took the area back. That was not expected, apparently, but they were probably planning that for like ever. The Taliban is actually very, very skilled at what they do, at propaganda and fighting and all of that stuff. Don't underestimate that group. That will be your downfall. But the point is, Biden used Donald Trump's plan for this, and it wasn't an awful plan, which is why it wasn't like modified or reversed or changed or whatever. Because honestly, it wasn't even Trump's plan. It was Trump's general's plan that somebody else wrote up. You think Donald Trump sat there writing this idea out for how he wanted the Afghanistan withdrawal to take place? No, it was his aides that planned all of this stuff out. And it wasn't terrible. It could have gone better. It was not that bad. But they used this as a propaganda tool because it works. It plays among these people. They believe it. That's why they use this as a propaganda tool.
Made me so mad. Any man or woman in the military, this is why we stand behind our veterans, because there should be in America where we never leave anyone behind. Never.
We didn't leave anybody behind in Afghanistan. What's he even talking about? There were people who chose to stay, but that was of their own free will. That wasn't because Biden didn't have the room to fit them on the plane or something. Anybody who wanted to leave was free to leave. Other than actual Afghan citizens. A lot of people wanted to go who were from Afghanistan who couldn't come, and, I feel like we should have fit more of those on the plane. But, that's not who they're talking about. They're talking about U.S. soldiers. Every U.S. soldier who wanted out of Afghanistan got out of Afghanistan. That doesn't play to the persecution complex, though, and the supposed incompetence of Biden.
That was an act of war. That was an act of war against you. And it was by our own people.
And you know what an act of war justifies? Further aggression, further escalation. It was an act of war, which means that you are fully justified to do something psychotic to the U.S. government.
By a faulty administration that stood up and decided, it's okay, they're expendable.
When did Biden say that? When did Biden even imply that? When did he do something that gave you the idea that he thinks that people of the military are expendable? At what point? He pulled people out of a 20-year-long war. You know who seemed to believe those people were expendable? Trump. for not pulling them out sooner. Biden pulled these people out after 20 years. That is not a sign that he thinks they're expendable. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't play to their narrative, their propaganda, to portray the situation as it really is.
Well, that you say, well, they didn't say that. Well, that's what their actions said.
What actions, specifically? Tell me what they did, specifically, that gives you the impression that they thought that U.S. troops were expendable. There was nothing. They're pulling them out of a war. How does that imply they're expendable?
Oh, and by the way, we'll just leave $85 billion worth of military aircraft and cash.
That's complete misrepresentation of what happened, but okay.
It's not right. It's not right. It's a spit in the eye of every American who ever fought.
He's desperately trying to get people whipped into a blood frenzy. He'd do anything to get them whipped into a blood frenzy here.
And it's not okay. You're in a war, but that's not the end of the war. That's not the end of the battle. The end of the battle is not even here yet. We're still fighting. Then while we were dealing with all of this, what we didn't know, in our schools, our kindergartners were being taught to go see drag shows and decide if they were male or female.
Which ones? Which schools specifically? Which teachers were doing this? Which students? When did this happen and where? Can you give me some information on this? Because I'm sorry, I've heard this an awful lot, and I've heard a lot of other weird stuff about kindergartens. I mean, like, this is a perfect example right here. Pastor Andrew Womack, on the same network, the Victory Network, that Flashpoint is on.
A friend of mine in Illinois actually knows a teacher that comes to school as a furry and wears ears and a tail and uses a litter box at the front of the classroom to relieve himself.
I've heard plenty of stuff like this. Haven't seen a lick of evidence for it. None. Or how about this one? This one was from, that last one, Andrew Womack, that was from September 2022. This one is from January 2022. This is at a school board meeting.
It was addressed by a child a couple months ago that they are put in an environment where there are kids that identify as a furry, a cat or a dog, whatever. And so yesterday I heard that at least one of our schools in our town has in one of the unisex bathrooms, a litter box for the kids that identify as cats.
Which school? Which kid? Which teachers? Which bathrooms? None. It doesn't exist. It's a fabricated problem. It's a pretend problem. And these people are absolutely obsessed with the fact that this is happening. They just can't name a place. They can't give any proof for it. They just know it. If they could just get in there, they could identify it. No proof is ever provided. They just scream about it constantly. Once again, getting them whipped into a blood frenzy over nothing.
So while most of us were at home going, what? What? They were turning your children. And they're turning your grandchildren.
No, they're not. This is just fear-mongering nonsense.
We thought public school was a good thing, and it should have been.
Oh, now they're trying to destroy public school. They're trying to get rid of it entirely. They're propagandizing against it. Fascinating.
But what has happened in the public school system is an abhorrent disaster. My point of that, it's an act. The enemy, the devil, Satan, is after your kids. Let's go back in history. Hitler, remember what Hitler did? Was after the young people. Changed the younger generation, the brown shirts, to take and twist. Because if he can turn...
Okay, so I don't think he's fully aware of what he's even talking about right now. There was a group called the Hitler Youth that was kind of like the Boy Scouts a little bit. That would teach you to be a good Aryan child and teach you to follow in Hitler's footsteps and all that other good stuff. That was what the Hitler Youth was, and that's probably what he's referring to. The brown shirts were a completely different thing. A lot of the brown shirts came from the Hitler Youth, like the older group of the Hitler Youth. It was basically people who'd go around starting riots. The Proud Boys are probably a more accurate depiction or representation of the brown shirts in modern day America. Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, those types of peoples. Those would be Donald Trump's brown shirts. They go around to places, protest for him, get into trouble and loot and riot and all that other stuff in the name of Donald Trump, in the name of Hitler in the cases of the brown shirts. I'm not really sure what he's even talking about here when he's comparing the two, but whatever.
Turn them, it can turn everybody else. Stalin, the Russians, during the height of the Cold War, 1 in 4 Russian was a KGB informant. Think about that.
Okay, I haven't heard that. That doesn't really sound right, but I guess it's not completely unrealistic.
1 in 4. I went over there not long after the wall came down and met our driver. We were over there doing some stories about what was going on. And he said, I was saved many 12 years ago.
Many 12 years ago, okay.
But I didn't tell my wife because I didn't know if she was an informant. I didn't tell my kids.
Yeah, they actually, the KGB encouraged children to report on their parents. That's very true, and that's deeply, deeply concerning for many reasons. Just the way that it worked. It was a death cult in its own right, and it's extremely concerning. In a lot of ways, these people here on Flashpoint are trying desperately to revive the idea of brown shirts and, informing on family members and everything else. It's really, really sick, disturbing stuff, man. These pastors know persecution gives them power over their congregation, who will listen to whatever they say without question. Absolutely. Yep. As long as you feel persecuted, you'll be willing to do anything to alleviate that misplaced feeling of persecution. It's insane. Absolutely insane. Housing is a bit shit. Yeah, that's true. There are a lot of problems with the economy. Another problem is that a third of the wealth in the United States is owned by 1% of the people in it. That's a huge problem. There are problems, but these are long-lasting problems that really started back in Reagan's day when he destroyed taxes and stuff, lowered it dramatically, and implemented trickle-down economics and everything. A lot of this goes back to Reagan and cannot really be blamed on Biden, and there's nothing Biden could do to fix it right now if he wanted. The economy is right now objectively better than when Donald Trump was in power at any point during Trump's presidency, even before the pandemic. So I don't even care. I don't want to hear it. The economy is not terrible, relatively speaking. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed and resolved. It's a gig economy in large part and a service-based economy, and it's really a wreck, and people are suffering terribly, but a lot of that routes back to Reagan, not Biden, not even Trump.
The wall came down. I told my wife she had become a Christian 12 years ago. So why is this so important? If we do not stand up, you've heard all these men say the same thing in their own words. We have to stand up. This is not just a battle for America. This is a battle for you. How many of you remember when President Trump said, look, they're not after me, they're after you?
Yeah, this is a piece of propaganda that floated around social media a lot. Yeah, this right here, in reality, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. This is all over the place back in, I don't know. Hell, it's still all over the place. They're repeating it currently. I'm just in the way. It's just propaganda. It's fascist, extremist propaganda, so.
Foreign powers are out to destroy America. The world is watching what happens in America. And I do not care. This is the resolve you're going to have to get to. You get to the place where your resolve says, I do not care. This is why I love Mike Lindell. He says he's a marketer, but he's a genius.
Are they supposed to be mutually exclusive? He says he's a marketer, but really, he's actually a genius. Can't you be both? Can't you be a marketing genius? Kind of funny. Lindell is not a genius by any stretch of the imagination. I honestly feel bad for the guy. He's obviously dealing with some kind of a mental issue right now. I don't know what exactly, but maybe he's still on drugs. I don't know. Something is up with him, though, sadly.
But how many of you, if you saw the FBI arties, if you wouldn't lock up and go, what'd I do? You know.
You should have no reason to do that unless you actually did something wrong and are expecting it. I don't see an FBI van and get freaked out. I don't expect to be pulled over or any of that stuff. You know why? I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not like a terrorist like Mike Lindell is or like his followers are. I don't live in fear of the FBI coming after me because I'm not a terrorist. If you're a terrorist, you should live in fear that the FBI is breathing down your throat at all times. I think that's a good thing.
He was out there trying to get him to arrest him.
No. That's not exactly right. He said he wasn't giving up his phone unless they let him talk to his lawyer. And he said, "Are you going to arrest me?" And they said, "No, but we are taking the phone." So they allowed him to call his attorney, and the attorney said, "Just give him the phone." He's not trying to get arrested. Although it wouldn't surprise me if he did try to get arrested, because that would be fantastic persecution porn for the people that are watching this right now. It's exactly why Steve Bannon refused to testify to the January 6th committee. He could have gone up there and said, "I plead the fifth 90-something times," like Alex Jones did, or like Roger Stone did, or any of the others. Instead, he chose to specifically not show up so that he would be arrested. So he'd call their bluff and spend, 30 days in jail maybe? Who cares? The amount of publicity that comes from being arrested like that, you can't pay for that kind of publicity. That's why he did what he did, instead of just pleading the fifth over and over.
Don't just take my phone, arrest me. And then he turns around and starts witnessing to the guy.
That guy's wearing a hat that says FBI, firm believer in Jesus. Wouldn't that be FBIJ? Okay. That's a terrible hat.
You like that, don't you? You like that, but here's my point. I'm going to turn serious now. What are you doing?
Your mom.
What are you standing up for?
Your mom.
You may be here tonight and you're thinking, yeah, I'm for conservative values. I'm mad and I want Trump back in office, and you knew this would be a nice meeting where you could come and do that. That's great. We're all on the same viewpoint on that. But let me bring it home really easily to you right now. You see, there's a Goliath in your life. And if there's a Goliath in your life and you're a believer, then you know that there's a David on the inside of you.
See, once again, he's depicting the people in the audience as taking a weapon and attacking their enemies with it. He is drawing this picture for them vividly. That's why he led this whole speech up with, "I'm not telling you to do this, but," and then goes down this whole long list of reasons why they should do this, and then depicts them doing it. David and Goliath.
And if there's a David on the inside of you, you're not looking at how big Goliath is or how many people he destroyed. What you're seeing is what David said. What do I get if I kill him? Now tell me again what I get if I take this guy out. That's bold Mike Lindell type of confidence. So listen, this is very simple. If you want to get that kind of confidence, you can't get that from external input. That's got to come from in here. And the only way you're going to get that is become warrior-minded. And when you become warrior-minded, and this is the study that everything I look at keeps coming up, warrior, warrior, warrior. Because the church has been warriorless. I'm looking for some warriors. The army may be looking for a few good men, but I'm looking for a few warriors in the room. But the real battle isn't here at this meeting. The real battle is when you go home and you go back to work. And you go look at your child or your grandchild that doesn't know what sex they are.
Okay, everybody knows what sex they are. Every single person on planet Earth, okay? There is a difference between sex and gender, but nuance goes right out the window with these people. They don't even care. They just want to propagandize, and that's exactly what he's doing right now.
That's when the real battle comes. We've got to stand up. But there's only one way you're going to do that. You heard Mike say about being in the Word. That's absolutely the truth. So we're going to give you an opportunity tonight. I don't understand. Last year, this time, we stood up and Mario Murillo gave an altar call, and Pastor Hank and I were on the side going, God, I hope somebody comes down. Then we realized our eyes were open to where we're at. So I got a few scriptures for you because this is what it means to be a warrior. You see, I can't do this out of my own spirit. I have to rely on Jesus who lives inside of me. I have to, because it makes no sense. When we step out and we go do what we do every day, there's got to be an understanding that there's something living on the inside of you that's much bigger than who you are on your own. That gives you that David kind of boldness that says, what do I get, God, if I take this guy out?
Dude, this is so fucking whacked out. What do I get if I take this guy out? Seriously. That is the reason why he prefaced this whole talk with, I'm not telling you to take your gun, but because it was going to be like this. This is as close to a flat-out call for violence as I've heard from these people. This is pretty direct and disturbing.
Let me show you a few scriptures right here. Put the first one up, gentlemen. 1 Corinthians 15:58 in the Amplified Class says, therefore, my beloved brethren.
Okay, I just want to point out the AMP version. I don't know why he's using the AMP version here. I don't know why any of them use the AMP version. I had never heard of this version before. It's because it's modified to be closer aligned to like supporting Donald Trump and election fraud than most Bibles. Seriously, there are verses in the Bible that talk about God saving people from destruction and this and that. The AMP version includes the word fraud in it. God will save people from fraud and destruction and things. No reason to include that word in there. The original language does not have any word that could possibly be translated to mean fraud in that section. That's just one example of a verse in the AMP version that was modified to be more in line with modern-day evangelicals rather than accuracy. Aside from all of that, usually these people use the King James Version. So it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for these people to be using the AMP version, other than because it supports their already held beliefs and twists words around in translations a little bit to be more in line with Donald Trump and how much they love the guy, basically.
The Amplified Class says, therefore, my beloved brethren, be firm, steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, always being superior, excelling, doing more than enough in the service of the Lord, knowing and being continually aware that your labor in the Lord is not futile. It's not wasted for no purpose. Go to the next one. 2 Corinthians 2:14. Thanks be to God who in Christ always leads us to triumph as trophies in Christ's victory, and through us spreads and makes evidence the fragrance of the knowledge of God everywhere. See, when you read this as a believer, this ought to light you up.
Again, don't trust a single word that they read out of this Bible. It's been twisted around and changed to say things that are not representative of what the Bible actually says. Be very skeptical when you read anything from the AMP version.
Next one. You are of God, little children, and you have overcome them.
New King James Version now. Isn't that weird? Now they're using a different translation. Why are they switching between translations? You know why? Because different translations contain words that support their beliefs more than others. Either it says the words, or either it has those meanings or connotations, or it doesn't. Why would you switch between different translations? That makes no sense whatsoever unless you are propagandizing. That is exactly what they're doing.
Because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Yeah? Do you believe that? I said, do you believe it? You see, you've been in an active war for the last few years more than you've ever been before. Now, there's a lot of people out there saying Jesus is coming soon, and he is. But listen, we got a lot of work to do before Jesus comes back. Don't get me wrong, I'm ready to go on the first bus load out. However, there's other scripture that say, well, occupy until he comes. So if you have never made Jesus Christ the Lord of your life, I'm going to ask you to do something bolder than you've ever done before, and that's stand up. And musicians, come out here. Stand up and come down to this altar, and we're going to pray with you.
Musicians?
Because you need the warrior spirit that lives within you. There's only one way this is going to happen. There's only one path. There's only one way, and that way is Jesus Christ. And if it's not Jesus Christ, you're not going to make it. This is the time, this is the season where we have to understand we are not in a battle to save our house. We're not in a battle to save our pension. We're not even in a battle to save our iPhone. We're in a battle of the ages. And the battle of the ages is for the very soul of America, and the very soul of America is you and it's me. And we are not going to let that happen. Let me read you a scripture. Come now, if you're ready to give Jesus your life.
Oh, wait, are they, I guess they're going to baptize people? Am I reading this correctly?
Dare you. This is the weirdest altar call I've ever given. I dare you to come down here and say, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
All right, here he is. I'm ready to be used of God. I'm ready to be a warrior. I'm ready to see God use me to change my life, change my family, change my community, change this nation. Because we can't do it. We can't do it alone.
God, this is psychotic, dude. This is full-blown fascist propaganda. Honestly. This is full-blown fascist propaganda.
All right, now I want to read you a scripture in Jeremiah 20. This is the one that I like so much. Jeremiah 20, verse 11, and this is in the ESV.
Why are they switching translations so much? I don't understand. They shouldn't be switching translations. Pick a translation and go with it, whichever one you think is most accurate. Or do you not care which translation it is? Do you think that different translations don't really matter at all? Would you be willing to use Jehovah's Witnesses' translation of the Bible? Seriously. They shouldn't be switching between the translations this much unless they're trying to pick out versions that support their already held beliefs the most. That is the only context in which it seems like it would be okay to switch translations. If you are only trying to get the Bible to represent what you already believe and not looking to the Bible for what it wants you to think.
The Lord is with me as a dread warrior. Therefore my persecutors will stumble. They will not overcome me. They will be greatly shamed, for they will not succeed. Their eternal dishonor will never be forgotten. So what is a dread warrior?
Something psychotic, I'd be willing to bet.
When you look that up, dread means the warrior Christ strikes fear and terror in those who oppose him. Well, I think we need a few dread warriors. That when you take the stage, when you walk into your job next week, people go, there's something different about John or Sue. There's something different. She's got a boldness, or he's got a boldness that says, I'm going to live for God. I'm going to say things the way they are. I'm not willing to let my family go to hell. I'm not willing to let my country go to hell, my city go to hell. I'm going to stand up for Christ. I'm going to stand up. Look, gone are the days, Pastor Hank, when we give these little wimpy, emotional pleas to come give Jesus your life. It's time for you to get up and get down here. It's time to buck up. I'm looking for a few good warriors. I'm drafting you into the army of the Lord tonight.
The language that they use about drafting people into a war, and they're at war, and this is a battle, and you need to be ready to blah, blah, blah. So concerning on so many levels. These people have real problems and are deeply, deeply disturbing. If I saw a group of 15 people saying this to each other, it'd scare the shit out of me. This is a group of hundreds of thousands, millions of listeners that are talking about all this stuff. This is disturbing beyond belief.
If you're ready to serve, join these down here. Now I'm going to ask those of you that are left not to come down here, but I want to ask those of you to stand. Now I'm talking to believers in the room, and I'm going to get back to here. I only want you to stand up if you're ready to give Jesus more control, if you're ready to stand up to be a warrior for Christ. And I mean this, don't stand up if you don't mean it. It's okay. There's no condemnation here. You may not be at that place. If you're ready to be that warrior, I love it that you came to Flashpoint tonight and opening the Heavens Conference. That's great. But it's of no value if it doesn't do anything in your life. It's of no value. I want you to leave from here. Most of you will be here for several days. You need to go home changed. I need to go home changed. I need encouragement. I need to be inspired and lifted up, and that's what I've got tonight. But more than inspiration, I'm asking you for a new level of commitment to the call that Jesus put on your life. There's a great word Pastor Hank delivered about those dreams. So all of you with those dreams that you knew God called you to do, I'm asking you to dig those out again. To be bold enough to say, God, I'll dig. If this is what you want me to do, I'm ready to do it. And take a step towards that. Start praying that watchman decree.
Start praying the watchman's decree. So it's supposed to be a prayer, apparently. Jesus, dude. These people are so beyond disturbing. When I said I'd be disturbed if 15 people were saying this, I'm not joking. There are literally millions of people who tune into this. This is on the Victory Network, on TV, on DirecTV, Dish Network, the whole 9 yards. disturbing doesn't even begin to describe what this is, honestly. And this is a problem that's going to have to be dealt with at some point as a society. We have to deal with this at some point, somehow. I don't know how. But they're not going to stop until they control the government. It's written right into our Constitution that they're not allowed to control the government or whatever else. But I don't think that they care. I don't think they intend to let that stop them. I think they're going to reinterpret it until it says what they want it to. And that is, in itself, disturbing as shit. These people are nutty, man. I'm telling you, they are. It's nut central up in this piece. But I'll tell you what, that's where I'm going to end it. Let me know what you think of this. And if you want to see more of this, let me know in the comments or on Twitter at Telltale Atheist.